The series is set in a toxic, dystopian future where a community resides inside a massive underground bunker with numerous levels called Silo. The residents live in a society that abides by several rules supposedly designed to keep them safe from the outside world. As the series opens, we see a man pinning his badge to his shirt and getting ready for the day. His name is Holston, the sheriff at Silo, where thousands have sought safety from an unknown catastrophe. He enters the giant base with many floors of marketplaces, livestock pens, and indoor agriculture, which seem to have been created specifically to support life in this post-apocalyptic world. Holston then tells us about an agreement called the Pact, which keeps the residents of Silo in the dark about who built the silo and why everything is the way it is, while the people are unaware when it will be safe to venture outside. One thing is certain. It is not now. Holston clocks in on his work and starts scribbling a letter, on top of which he lays his sheriff's star. He then tells his deputy Sam to meet him in Holding 3 and proceeds to the destined room. On his way there, he looks outside the window, which shows the brazen view of the so-called unsafe outside world. Seconds later, Sam enters the scene only to find out that his colleague has decided to go out of the silo, breaking its cardinal law. The scene changes to a few years back, and we see Holston with his wife Allison talking about how they desperately want to conceive a child. However, since everything inside the silo needs to be sanctioned, conceiving is no exception. When the couple learns that they've been approved to try to conceive within a 365-day window, they become ecstatic. It isn't just them that they are happy about the news, the whole community seems to know about it and congratulates them. While the happy couple enjoys their meal at the community dining hall, Gloria, a fertility counselor, gives them an unwanted visit. Holston isn't very happy to have her due to the rumors circulating about her being a fraud. Later, the couple visits the doctor, who extracts Allison's birth control capsule, and we consequently see an automated time screen that displays the remaining days for conception. In the following scene, Allison is at work with her friend Karen when their boss Bernard reprimands her for not following the rules. It is revealed that she recently wrote an article about wanting to retrieve the supposedly deleted files during the rebellion uprising. The article has since been taken down as it meant going against Silo's basic rule. Annoyed at her thesis being taken down, Allison protests about all the rules they must follow to her husband, who doesn't seem very fond of the conversation as it is his job as the sheriff to make sure everyone stays inside. Meanwhile, an annual celebration called the Freedom Day is approaching, and the couple seems to fail to conceive despite several attempts, which results in Allison meeting Gloria in private. Believing that Allison is often curious about things, Gloria makes her question who is actually behind all the missing information from the time when Silo was created. She fills her head with conspiracy theories, and by the end of the conversation, Allison is overwhelmed. Later, she voices her worry to Holston, who claims that Gloria can manipulate people and reassures his wife that they should be positive. Finally, it is Freedom Day, and everyone is busy celebrating it with the mayor. Allison is on her way to meet George, a repair guy who she is friends with. George turns out to be a fan of her work, so he shows her a hard drive that he found while doing a repair job in the bottom-most level. In the silo, anything from before time is considered a relic, most of which have been destroyed. However, this hard drive dates 140 years back, and its files seem to be hidden. After encrypting the code and digging deeper, Allison understands one thing for sure. It is an illegal relic and could get George killed. She immediately urges him to get rid of it. George, however, continues to go through it and discovers the blueprint of the silo with a tunnel at the bottom that no one knows of. Allison, who is growing extremely frustrated with what is occurring within the silo, returns to see Gloria. She has decided to observe everything in its entirety and solve the mystery about the silo's existence. She even lies to Holston about being busy at work to visit George every day and study the hard drive. After days of getting nothing, Allison suddenly stumbles upon a video that changes everything. In the video lies the truth, deliberately concealed by the authorities. It shows the actions of a woman named Jane who was sent outside the silo to clean. In the background of the video, we can see birds flying in the sky, which clearly means life is possible outside. This shocks both George and Allison and also leads the latter to drift from her husband as she avoids him at night. Amidst all of this, the time window for conceiving a baby ends without the couple being successful. The next day, Holston waits for his wife at the doctor's clinic for their meeting about the baby, but she doesn't show up. Given how she has been acting recently, he becomes worried and goes to look for her at her office, only to find that she has taken a sick leave. He goes back home and discovers Allison, who seems to be waiting for him. She runs the tap to prevent the judicial system from listening in on their conversation and tells him everything she saw in the video. He doesn't believe her, but is immediately left dumbfounded when she shows him the implant she removed from her abdomen with a kitchen knife. This proves that everything that happened at the clinic a year ago was just a mere act to prevent them from having a baby because the government had caught on their desire to conceive. Holston can barely believe his eyes, but he hurriedly runs to get a doctor to treat his wife at home. On his way, he meets Sam, who tells them that Allison is in the cafeteria. By the time he reaches there, she has already started to expose the truth she discovered to everyone. When no one believes her words, she demands to go outside, which leaves Holston in horror. She has committed the biggest crime one can in Silo, which causes her to be handcuffed and taken away. As a result of Allison's ties, both George and Gloria are questioned. However, nothing is found. Holston thinks that the stress of conceiving a child turned her that way, but Allison remains consistent about her beliefs and wants to uncover the truth despite the consequences. In the following scene, the mayor announces that every convict who tries to go outside will be allowed to do so to set an example of how dangerous it is. However, once they step outside, they will be banished from Silo and will not be able to enter again. Allison is ecstatic to hear the news and is given a duty to clean the exterior camera and walls of the silo before she wanders off. Holston is extremely nervous for her and wants her to rethink, but Allison is confident the outside is not toxic. Despite the uneasy feeling, Holston does his job of reciting the oath, emphasizing that the walls of Silo are safer than the outside. As the final moment approaches, Allison expresses her love to her husband and walks away. Holston remains heavy-hearted and presses the button to the main gate. On finally emerging outside, Allison looks around, unable to believe she has finally made it. She then starts cleaning the camera while the people inside the silo observe her happily. Upon completing her task, she walks away from the wall, but collapses under the shade of nearby trees. The people watching her with curiosity assume that she is dead, but it is not confirmed yet. The story then skips 2 years into the future, where we see a grief-stricken Holston whose whole world has fallen apart after his wife's death. One day, to add to his grief, he is informed about George's death, who had been transferred to a mechanical position. He also comes to know that Juliet Nichols, whom Holston has been in contact with, believes George's death is a murder rather than a suicide. Hence, Holston is determined to uncover the truth. The scene then fast-forwards 2 more years, and Holston decides to venture out and look for the same truth that his wife died searching for. He is legally permitted to walk out, and the entire silo watches in anticipation as he does so. When Holston reaches the surface, the revelation of the world before him proves that his wife had always been right. He sees the blue sky accompanied by greenery and birds. After enjoying the view himself, he cleans the camera lens to continue to share the vision of the land that Silo has been keeping from them. Once he discovers his wife Allison's lifeless body, he walks towards it without a second thought. Unfortunately, before moving forward, he chokes and collapses on the ground next to her. Meanwhile, Juliet, who's also been watching everything, is enraged and goes to the generator chamber screaming her lungs out, calling Holston a liar. On the other hand, the mayor and deputy are trying to figure out who the next sheriff will be because the lack of law and order in Silo seems to be growing every day. After his colleague's death, Sam is seen in his office with a letter that Holston gave him before he went out. In the letter, Holston recommends Juliet to be the next sheriff. At the same time, things are getting difficult for Mayor Ruth as she has limited time to decide who the best candidate is. Upon being told about Holston's letter, the mayor decides to talk to Juliet and give her a chance. Holston, who was Juliet's only hope to see the outside, is now gone, so she decides to take things into her own hands. She goes to the dark, open space in the silo and drops a bundle of ropes down the suspended beam in hopes of escaping. However, she runs out of luck and trips, causing her to cling to the rope and eventually abort the mission. A depressed Juliet, who failed to take the plunge, returns home and passes out after chugging a whole bottle of alcohol. The next morning, she wakes up to a fellow engineer beside her in her bed. She starts to ask questions, but before they are answered, the alarm rings, reminding them that they are late for work. Juliet races down to engineering, where she smacks a young engineer named Cooper for investigating the generator in an unsafe way before taking charge of the situation. Later, she is pulled to a meeting with the head of engineering, who tells her to sober up and take the day off. At the same time, Mayor Ruth steps up her investigation into Juliet's candidacy, for she is still unsure why Holston wanted her as the next sheriff. On their way to meet her, they take a detour to meet Bernard, with whom she inquires about Juliet and asks if she is a good pick. However, Bernard does not like the idea and claims that Juliet once stole tapes from the IT department. Next, Ruth visits Dr. Pete Nichols, who happens to be Juliet's father. She tells him about the possibility of his daughter being the next sheriff and inquires why she would work as an engineer in a harsh environment rather than living a fulfilled life with her dad. Ruth finds out that Juliet always liked machines and found solace in fixing things. Similarly, Martha, a fellow engineer, puts in good words for her colleague, which seems to convince the mayor. Upon finding out what Martha did, Juliet is mad at her. She absolutely hates the idea of her being the sheriff, doubting her abilities outside machines. When the time comes, Ruth asks Juliet to take on the role, but Juliet outright declines, pointing out that the generator is not working well and she needs to stay and fix it. Despite the rejection, the mayor hands over Holston's old sheriff badge, letting her know about his last wish. The badge seems to have something engraved, seeing which Juliet changes her mind and accepts the proposal, but on one condition. The mayor has to allow her to fix the generator as it is old and has been in the worst condition lately. Although skeptical about her abilities and worried that people might panic, the mayor agrees. She doesn't fail to mention that the mission will require the generator to be shut off and cause an 8-hour blackout, which the people have to be warned about. Down in the mechanical, the engineers discuss how risky fixing the generator is. The slightest mistake could leave everyone in the dark forever or even kill the mechanics. But despite all the risks, Juliet remains adamant in her decision. As the entire silo waits on its feet, the generator is turned off, and Juliet works with Cooper to try and fix it. The time is limited, and Cooper's clumsiness slows them down even more. With mere seconds remaining on the clock, Juliet fixes a few wires, and the generator is turned back on. While everyone is busy cheering, Juliet's victory is hollow, given how close they came to annihilation. In the following scene, Juliet bids Martha goodbye, leaving her job as an engineer to take on the role of the sheriff. Before leaving, she apologizes to the latter and gives her a relic to repair, which was a camcorder left by George. Higher up, Bernard returns, knowing Juliet was appointed as the new sheriff, which indeed was not to his liking. Back at Ruth's office, Sam stumbles into a shocking sight and finds the mayor on the floor in a pool of blood. She keeps struggling to breathe, which is assumed to be the effect of a poisoning. Since she last drank the water offered by Sam, he is suspected for poisoning her. In the very next scene, we find out that Ruth suffered a tragic death. At the same time, we are introduced to Deputy Marnes, who seems to have been close to the mayor and is thus devastated. Upon investigation, it is found that Marnes was the intended victim of the poisonous attack, but Ruth got killed instead. The death also makes Juliet more passionate about her new duty as the sheriff because she feels like she owes it to Ruth. Somewhere else, Bernard is appointed to serve as the interim mayor for some time, and as such, he will also appoint Juliet as the sheriff. When she finally arrives at the sheriff's office, Sandy, her assistant, does not make her life any easier. As it turns out, there is a class-based discrimination in the silo, as the bottom levels are subjected to prejudice. Juliet, being a worker from the bottom level, is not immune to this discrimination. Frustrated at the way she is being treated, Juliet reminds Sandy that she is the one in charge and demands to be brought George's file. Soon later, Sandy returns and informs her that the particular file is missing. Juliet is disappointed before she finds a file made by Holston for the next sheriff. The file includes a mysterious hint and a handwritten letter, but before Juliet can dig into this, Deputy Sam finds himself in trouble in the market. He starts smacking around a man named Frankie. Frankie had poisoned 2 entire levels of silo with rat poison a year ago. Watching a frustrated Sam do everything he can because no one else is taking Ruth's murder seriously gives Juliet enough reasons to confide in him about her activities. She briefs everything to him just like she did to Holston about George's murder. She then asks Sam's assistance in uncovering the truth behind all the deaths, and the two join hands. After work, Sam resorts to drinking to take off the stress of everything that has been happening lately. In a drunken state, he returns home and is suddenly attacked by a man who had been hiding and waiting for him inside. The attacker pounces on him as soon as he enters, and in no time, Sam is overpowered and held at gunpoint. The next scene shows Juliet in her office when she hears a rattling noise coming from the vents and decides to investigate it. To her shock, she discovers something that appears to be a crucial clue, a rattling chain attached to a bag of papers. To her luck, the files are named George Wilkins and are the ones that she had ever so waited to find. It has several pieces of paperwork and transcripts of his interaction with the police, but nothing ominous at first glance. Juliet suspects she is missing something because Holston must have kept this a secret for a reason. But before she investigates further, she is sidetracked by reports of Deputy Sam's passing. The head of security for the silo, Sims, blames her for not directing enough security to keep an eye on an already paranoid Sam. But Juliet retaliates, causing a slight commotion. Not even hours after the death, Sims announces that a new deputy sheriff named Paul Billings is taking over to replace the position. When the men are gone, Juliet examines Marnes' apartment, observing that a drawing of Ruth appears to be missing suspiciously. She also discovers a list of names in his pocket, among which one name is circled: Doris Kennedy. She takes it and returns to the management team, Sims, Paul, and Bernard. Following the death of the mayor, Silo is in a state of chaos. So, to keep the situation in control, Bernard intends to conceal Sam's passing for as long as he can. He questions what to do next, and Juliet advises burying the bodies next to one another like lovers, whereas Sims wants to invent a holiday to divert attention from the tragedy. Bernard decides that they should do a double burial for Ruth and Sam, concluding that they can make up the tale of their forbidden romance. Everyone participates in the funeral, by biting into an apple from the improvised orchard and tossing it in with the bodies. Later, when Juliet returns to her office, she meets her assistant, Sandy, again. After Sam's murder, she wants to work with Juliet, as she is afraid the current judiciary is just concerned with upholding law and order and has no interest in ever seeking the truth. Together, they first go to meet Charles Martin, previously convicted of robbing 15 apartments. After questioning him, they rule him out as a suspect. Next, they make their way to see Patrick Kennedy, Doris's husband, whose name Juliet had found as a clue earlier. When no one answers the door, she breaks in by using the pin on her badge. Upon snooping around the apartment for a while, she comes across a box of rat poison, along with the missing sketch of Ruth from Sam's home. Everything seems to be perfectly fabricated to blame the murders on him, so instead of convicting him, she decides to track him down and keep him somewhere safe. On the other hand, the new Deputy Billings heads back to Judicial instead of going back home for lunch, where he discovers a man by the name of Doug working as Sim's sidekick. They chat for a while about some kind of plan and seem to be plotting something. After the meeting, he goes to Juliet and tells her about a recent information the Judicial has received from an unknown source. The reports say that the authorities have identified someone named Melby as the man they want to apprehend. What Juliet doesn't know is that this is a sophisticated plot to remove her from her position as an embarrassment for arresting the incorrect person. Later on, the evidence that was hidden in Kennedy's apartment would be falsely found that will make him seem like the murderer and make a fool out of Juliet for arresting Melby. That way, she would be returned to Mechanical and everything would be as it was before. Juliet gets a hint of what is going on and releases an arrest warrant against Kennedy, heading out to get him before the Judicial does. However, she isn't the only one, as it is a race to the top organized by Bernard. Alongside Juliet is Doug, who has been sent for the same purpose. After determining that he is the one who planted the evidence, she pursues him through the silo. Amidst the commotion, Doug and Juliet fall further and further until the latter is left holding on for dear life. Even in such a condition, she is successful in stopping Doug by breaking his finger. When the fight ends, Doug goes to meet Sims, who is now worried that their ties will get him in trouble. Hence, he kills him by pushing him off the railing. Even after the death, he criminally claims that this was Doug's punishment for failing to fulfill his obligations as Sim's shadow. It is finally revealed that Doug was responsible for Sam, George, and Ruth's deaths, and Sims was the one who ordered him to murder them. With this information about Doug, Juliet goes to see Judge Meadows and tells her everything. Although Meadows finds the story quite unbelievable, he is aware that it will put an end to conspiracy rumors and should be sufficient to settle the matter once and for all. Back at work, Juliet discovers that Sandy has accepted a voluntary transfer so she may be nearer to her family. She genuinely had no idea Juliet would solve Sam's problem so quickly, if at all, but she surprises Juliet by giving her a compliment for her hard work. Sandy adds that she feels monitored at her job and is relieved to be returning to the ground. In the following scene, Juliet meets Bernard, who finally appears to have realized that she will make a good sheriff. While she accepts his offer of assistance, all she wants right now is 2 days off work so she can visit her pals in the mechanical department, especially Martha. She needs to check to see what information George's camcorder can provide after all. That evening, Juliet visits Martha again to catch up and discovers that she doesn't have a magnifying glass powerful enough to magnify what's written inside the camcorder. But in Silo, using a magnification greater than a particular power is a judicial crime. After solving these 2 murders, Juliet feels as though she has earned Bernard's trust. She now intends to use judicial and management to adequately ascertain what happened to George. And that's a wrap for this movie recap. Thanks for watching.